At the auction, my husband generously spent money to purchase the villa worth over 100 million yuan. Everyone praised me, Mrs. Wilson, for being lucky to marry such a young and promising husband. But that night, it was his beautiful young secretary who moved in. When I went there, the secretary was wearing my pajamas, looking panicked. Mr. Wilson took me in because he pitied me. "Please don't misunderstand," she said. David Wilson blamed me for being overbearing and disliked me for acting like a resentful wife. I finally gave up on them and turned away without looking back. I originally wanted to mention divorce to David Wilson in person, but he didn't come home all night. When I first left the villa, I still hoped he would chase after me. But he didn't. At 8 o'clock in the morning, the door opened from the outside. David Wilson's little secretary, Calla, carried the unconscious David Wilson in. I watched as Calla skillfully placed David Wilson on the sofa and thoughtfully poured him a glass of water. "Mrs. Wilson, Mr. Wilson drank too much last night. Please take care of him," she said, as if she were David Wilson's wife and I were just a nanny. David Wilson lay on the sofa as soon as he entered the house and ordered me with his eyes closed. "I'm hungry. Make me some porridge." His tone was so matter-of-fact, as if I weren't his wife but a free nanny. Since we got married, I've played the role of a good wife. I prepared 3 meals a day for David Wilson, changing the dishes every day. And if he wasn't satisfied, he would make me do it again. He didn't like clothes washed by machines, so I hand-washed and ironed them for him every day. I've lived like this for 5 years. But I'm already tired. I didn't move. "I'm busy. Do it yourself," I said. David Wilson seemed surprised by my resistance. He opened his eyes, sat up, and looked at me. "Aisha, everything you wear, use, and live in is bought with my money. Now you don't even want to cook." He looked down on me with a mocking look in his eyes. This wasn't an equal gaze. In David Wilson's eyes, I relied on him to live, so I couldn't disobey a single word of his. After all, who was David Wilson? Now the most popular business tycoon in London. He was already the founder of a listed company at only 28. And what about me? Besides a father addicted to gambling, a mother relying on David Wilson's money to survive, and a younger brother still in high school, I had nothing. Seeing me not speak, David Wilson put his arms around my waist and leaned into my ear to comfort me. "Okay, Aisha, I know you're jealous about Calla. I just let her live there because I felt sorry for her. We didn't do anything. And that dress was really just something I threw to her casually. Haven't you not worn that pajama for a long time?" Although Calla was unwilling to hear this, she still softly agreed. "Yes, Mrs. Wilson. There's nothing between me and Mr. Wilson. Please don't misunderstand. I really didn't know that pajama was yours. I apologize to you here." Calla spoke pitifully, making me seem overbearing. Speaking of the pajama, I remembered the pajama I saw on Calla yesterday. It was a wedding gift David Wilson gave me when we first got married. The pajama wasn't very expensive, but it had a different meaning. It was a unique couple-style designed and made by David Wilson himself. Later, David Wilson got tired of wearing it and changed to better pajamas. So those 2 pajamas were put away. But when I went to that standalone villa yesterday, both Calla and David Wilson were wearing that pajama. I didn't know what retro feeling David Wilson was going for, but I only knew they looked very eye-catching together. I woke up from the memory and pushed David Wilson away. David Wilson was shocked by my action. Usually, I like to stick to David Wilson and never pushed him away like this. I took a step back and distanced myself from David Wilson. "David Wilson, let's get a divorce," I said. David Wilson widened his eyes when he heard me say this. He seemed unbelievable that the word divorce came out of my mouth. Calla was also surprised and covered her mouth. Then even sobbed. It's all my fault. Mrs. Wilson. Please don't be angry with Mr. Wilson because of me. David Wilson was a little annoyed but didn't have the heart to get angry with Calla. Calla. Go back and rest first, he said. Calla didn't want to leave but had no choice. She turned away reluctantly. After seeing Calla leave, David Wilson looked at me angrily. You want to divorce me? What will you do after the divorce? How will you support yourself and your family? Aisha. You're spending my money now. Don't be willful. David Wilson always used this way to silence me with a word about spending his money. I scoffed. David Wilson. I earned no less than you back then. You made me retire and be a housewife. David Wilson raised his eyebrows as if he didn't care about this at all. So what? Aisha. You've been a full-time housewife for 5 years and have been disconnected from society. Now things change quickly, and talents emerge every year. How can you compare? And even if I let you return to work, you can't achieve anything. You can only have a good life by relying on me. I clenched my fists. I've heard these PUA words for so many years and am really tired of them. He always used such language to brainwash me, making me feel that I could only rely on him. In everyone's eyes, it was already a blessing from my ancestors that I could marry the young and promising David Wilson. After all, my family was poor. How could I compare to the Wilson family with prominent family background and 3 generations of wealth? Marrying the only son of the Wilson family was like becoming a phoenix from a sparrow. Seeing me not speak, David Wilson thought I had compromised. He grabbed my hand and blamed me. You've changed a lot these years. You're not as understanding as before. I shook off David Wilson's hand. So you found Calla? She's young and smart. And she looks a bit like me before. David Wilson's face changed. And he was already a little impatient. But he still soothed me without falling out. Aisha. I know you're jealous. But didn't I promise you that the position of Mrs. Wilson will only be yours? Besides, you should know that in this circle, it's inevitable to act on social occasions. And Calla is the same. Yes. The position of Mrs. Wilson was mine. So I had to endure all the women outside with David Wilson, whether it was acting on social occasions or real relationships. I did act like this before, even when I saw David Wilson hugging left and right in nightclubs. I comforted myself that it was just acting on social occasions. But I knew Calla was different from other women. I was most familiar with the burning gaze David Wilson had when looking at Calla. He had looked at me like that before. But now the way he looked at me was with the contempt of a superior. In his eyes, I, a housewife with no income, wasn't worthy to speak to him equally. So he always spoke to me in a commanding tone. If you've figured it out, go make me porridge. I still need to go to the company and don't have time to take care of your little temper, David Wilson said. Then continued to lie on the sofa to rest and ignored me. I didn't listen to David Wilson to make porridge. Instead, I went into the room and called my friend Luna. Luna was a lawyer specializing in divorce cases. She was very happy when she knew I wanted a divorce and stayed up all night to draw up a divorce agreement for me. When it came to property, she asked me what I thought. After thinking for a moment, I asked for 20% of the shares of David Wilson's company and the standalone villa he had just purchased. David Wilson's company was established by himself without the help of his family. It included half of my life savings and all my connections. I didn't ask for much for these shares. And it was what I deserved. As for that standalone villa, since he said it was my birthday gift, of course I had to accept it. Luna quickly sent me the drafted divorce agreement. After confirming it was correct, I asked her to print it and have it delivered urgently. The express delivery was swift, arriving at the door in less than half an hour. When I opened the door, David Wilson had just woken up. He asked sleepily, "Is the porridge ready?" I handed him the divorce agreement. "No porridge. Just this. Sign it. And we'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau for the divorce." David Wilson was fully awake now. He stood up and took the agreement but didn't open it. Instead, he grew angry. His face flushed with rage as he warned me in a low voice. "Aisha, don't go too far. What right do you have to ask for a divorce?" I scoffed. Did this man really think he was the almighty emperor? Seeing that I was determined, David Wilson changed his tone and began to plead gently. "Aisha, are you just mad that I didn't accompany you yesterday? Look, I won't go to the company today. Didn't you want to go to the beach? Let's go there." I stared at David Wilson without speaking. This was typical of him, thinking he could coax me and I'd forgive him unconditionally. Just as I was about to refuse, his phone rang. David Wilson glanced at me after seeing the caller ID, then answered it. I heard Kala's sobbing on the other end. David Wilson hurriedly stepped away from me and walked to the balcony. I didn't know what they said, but as soon as he hung up, he rushed to the sofa, grabbed his coat, and said, "I have something urgent to handle. I'll definitely be with you tomorrow." I knew he was going to find Kala. This was a common occurrence since Kala started working at the company a year ago. But I didn't care much. I just went to my room to pack my luggage. After packing, I left the marital home where I'd lived for 5 years and returned to the residence before getting married, a spacious apartment that wasn't small. I'd bought it with the money from my first project. At the time, I hadn't planned to buy such a large place. But David Wilson had said, "Only when you live comfortably can you be at ease." Later, when David Wilson needed funds for his startup, I sold many things but couldn't bear to part with this apartment. Now it had become my sanctuary. I tidied up the place and sat on the sofa, looking at the wedding photo we'd hung here 5 years ago when we first got married. In the photo, David Wilson and I smiled so happily. Back then, I never could have imagined we'd end up like this. David Wilson and I were high school classmates. We became desk mates right at the beginning of the new semester, and we sat next to each other for 3 whole years. We'd spent 3 full and wonderful years together, even agreeing to attend the same university for the college entrance exam. But on the day of the exam, just as I was heading to the test center, the loan sharks my father owed came to our door. They smashed furniture indiscriminately and beat my mother. My 5-year-old brother slipped out in the chaos and ran to fetch me back. I quickly called the police and rushed home to my mother's side. Although the police arrested the loan sharks and the Women's Federation helped my parents get divorced, my mother suffered a spinal injury and became paralyzed. I'd wanted to abandon the exam and work to care for her and my brother. But my mother refused, saying only by studying could give me a future. David Wilson also urged me to take the exam and even offered to repeat a year to accompany me. I refused, telling him to wait for me at Aston University. As I'd hoped, I was admitted to the finance department of Aston University the next year, becoming David Wilson's junior. Right after I enrolled, he prepared a grand confession ceremony for me. Our university days were simple and pure, like any other young couple, never tiring of being together. After graduated, I was admitted to a renowned company in London with the top grade in my class. Shortly after joining, I excellently completed a major project and was promoted to full-time employee ahead of schedule. Over the next 3 years, I worked hard and quickly rose to become a project manager. By then, David Wilson had quarreled with his family to marry me. His parents had always disliked me, seeing me as a gold digger after his money. To stop our marriage, they even threatened to kick him out. David Wilson was stubborn after leaving the Wilson family. He married me immediately and started his business with nothing. I invested all my savings to help him and connected him with many influential contacts. Fortunately, David Wilson was indeed a financial genius. He quickly got the company on track and profitable. In the first year of the company's establishment, David Wilson asked me to resign. My first reaction was refusal. But he continuously used sweet words to pua me. He said, "Aisha, it's not easy for a woman in the workplace. Why not resign and stay home? I'll support you anyway. In a few years, we can have some lovely babies. And you can take care of us." I was indeed swayed by his honeyed words and impulsively submitted my resignation. And so, I became a full-time housewife for 5 years. I closed my eyes, not wanting to recall the past. But suddenly, my stomach ached terribly. I rushed to the bathroom sink, retching continuously. "Congratulations. You're 3 months pregnant. You had an abortion before. If you terminate this pregnancy, you may have difficulty conceiving in the future." I sat on a chair outside the gynecology and obstetrics department, holding the diagnosis report. This child had come at the worst possible time. For years, I'd longed to have a child with David Wilson, but I couldn't get pregnant. His mother had even blamed my problematic body. It wasn't until later that I found out David Wilson had been adding birth control pills to my breakfast every day. He wanted to enjoy himself without a condom but didn't want children. So he drugged me. After that miscarriage, my body was already weak, and frequent use of birth control pills made conception difficult. But I never expected to get pregnant after asking for a divorce. The doctor repeatedly warned that I should pay attention to my frail health. An abortion might leave me infertile, urging me to consider carefully. I took it to heart and didn't schedule the abortion immediately. As I walked out of the hospital, staring at the ultrasound results, I collided head-on with someone. The girl opposite let out a scream and fell into the arms of the man beside her. "Are you?" The words of concern died in my throat as I recognized the two people in front of me. It was David Wilson and Calla. Calla looked pale, leaning weakly in David Wilson's arms. David Wilson had been angry, but his face showed shock when he saw me. Calla immediately apologized. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilson. I didn't mean to bump into you." David Wilson didn't let go of her. Instead, he held her tightly, as if afraid I'd take out my anger on her. I didn't speak, just bent down to pick up my medical report. Seeing that I wasn't harassed Calla, David Wilson spoke gently. "Are you sick? Why did you come to the hospital alone? Where's Luna?" How ridiculous. My husband, when I was ill, didn't think to care for me himself but asked someone else to accompany me. I only said 3 words, "medical exam." David Wilson glanced at me, then released Calla and explained. Calla sprained her ankle while delivering documents for me. I brought her to the hospital. Absurd. The CEO of a listed company personally accompanying his secretary to the hospital for a sprained ankle, what dedicated care for subordinates. "Oh," was all I said. Then walked straight past them without stopping. Annoyed by my indifference, David Wilson chased after me and grabbed my arm. "Aisha, are you still throwing a tantrum? Move back home quickly. My mother has softened her attitude toward you recently. She'll definitely accept you." I looked up at him and asked, "So what? Should I be grateful?" Seeing my firm stance, David Wilson softened. "Aisha, I know you're upset with me. Let's talk it out properly." Just as I was about to urge him to sign the divorce agreement, Calla let out a cry from behind us. We both turned around to see her lying on the ground, unconscious. David Wilson rushed to her side, scooped her up in a princess carry, and dashed to the emergency room without a word to me. I watched their retreating backs and turned to leave. When I got home, I started looking for a job, but it was anything but smooth. The industry was small, many knew I was David Wilson's wife. Even those who didn't could see my 5-year career gap, making it hard to get hired. In desperation, I reapplied to my old company. But the resume vanished like a stone in the sea. With no response. 3 days later, I received an offer from a moderately reputable company in London. They said if I helped them sign a new project at tonight's banquet, they'd specially make me their project director. After applying to nearly every suitable position in the city, this was the only callback. I decided to give it a shot. That evening, I arrived at the banquet venue as instructed. As soon as I walked in, Director Clark warmly introduced me to others. In this tight-knit circle, everyone knew me to some extent, eyeing me with thinly veiled curiosity. I couldn't join their idle chatter, just watching the clock. Supposedly it was time to start. But they seemed to be waiting for someone. "Here's Mr. Wilson," someone called out. All eyes turned to the door. I looked over and saw David Wilson and Calla entering together. My expression soured. No one had told me David Wilson would be here. My gaze fell on Calla's dress, a pricey off-season designer piece the brand had just sent me. I'd wanted to wear it to a previous banquet. But David Wilson had mocked my figure, implying I didn't deserve it. Now, he'd given it to Calla. David Wilson wasn't surprised to see me, just breezed past me to greet other executives. Director Clark joked, "Mr. Wilson's late, he should drink 3 cups as punishment." Everyone knew David Wilson had a stomach condition and never drank at social events. Director Clark leered at Calla. "Forgot Mr. Wilson can't drink, his secretary can take his place." I frowned. Calla was irritating, but Director Clark's sleazy tone was worse. She didn't flinch. Raising her glass, "Mr. Wilson's stomach can't handle alcohol. I'll drink these for him." As she lifted the glass, David Wilson grabbed her wrist. "Gentle now, you're a woman, no need to drink. Since it's Director Clark's invitation, we shouldn't refuse," he added, snatching the glass and downing it in one gulp. After 3 cups, he shielded her. "Secretary Calla is young, don't scare her." Sitting across from him, I coldly watched this display of chivalry. No sooner had he finished than Director Clark turned to me. "If the secretary can't drink, Mrs. Wilson should be up for it," he said, raising his glass. I wasn't a drinker, but knew I had to sip at least some. I took the glass and drained it, the harsh liquor burning my throat until I coughed violently. David Wilson just watched, making no move to help. 10 years of knowing each other. Yet I couldn't compare to Calla, who'd known him 10 months. After the drinks, it was time to discuss the project. But when I brought it up, David Wilson stepped forward. "No matter their offer, I'll double it, also Secretary Calla can close the deal." Everyone turned to me. To the outside world, we were still married. My husband was humiliating me to spoil another woman. I dropped my forced smile. Since the outcome was decided, there was no point staying. As I turned to leave, Calla grabbed my hand. "Are you angry, Mrs. Wilson?" "Mr. Wilson and I are just thinking of the company, please don't take it to heart." Her tone was faintly taunting. I tried to pull away, but she clung tightly. When I finally jerked free, she shrieked, staggered back, and collapsed. I'd barely tugged, nowhere near hard enough to knock her down. She lay on the floor, clutching her ankle, tearfully whining, "Mrs. Wilson, I don't know what I did wrong. Even if you hate me, you shouldn't push me." David Wilson shoved me aside, his strength caught me off guard, and I fell to the ground. He ignored me, rushing to help Calla. "Calla, are you okay?" She shook her head. "I'm fine. It's my fault for upsetting Mrs. Wilson." He scooped her up in a princess carry, glaring at me as he passed. "Aisha, this is too much. If anything happens to Calla, you'll pay." Then he carried her away. I laughed bitterly, trying to stand, when a sharp pain stabbed my stomach. Warmth trickled down my legs. I looked down and saw blood streaming down my thighs. I had a long, terrible dream. In it, David Wilson and Calla walked down the aisle, living happily ever after. I was disgraced, alone till the end. I jolted awake, gasping for air. A nurse soothed me, and soon the doctor arrived. The baby had already stopped developing when you were brought in. We had to perform an abortion. Your body is very weak now. You may never conceive again. I stared at my stomach. It looked the same as before. Of course, the baby was only 3 months. Not even formed yet. This child had been killed by his own father. When David Wilson shoved me and I started bleeding, some onlookers screamed. I tried to call an ambulance, but everything went fuzzy, and I passed out. Before blacking out, I vaguely saw someone carry me to the hospital. Now, I couldn't remember who my savior was. Closing my eyes, I thought of my first miscarriage. When the baby had also stopped developing, that had been the fault of David Wilson's sister. I'd never forget that snowy day. Because I was pregnant, his mother finally allowed him to take me to the family estate for New Year. I was thrilled, bringing piles of gifts, especially for the Wilson family's beloved youngest daughter. Wilson Emma disliked me, convinced I'd stolen her brother. She hit and cursed at me. Her mother dismissed it. She's just a child, don't take it personally. It was my first New Year there, so I just endured it. But I never expected Emma to push me from behind. My stomach slammed into a rock, and by the time we reached the hospital, the baby had no heartbeat. I had an induced labor operation. Devastated. But what could I do to a child under 10? I just wanted an apology. Instead, Mrs. Wilson scolded me for failing to protect her grandson. Even David Wilson blamed me, siding with his sister. From then on, I knew I'd never be family to them. I distanced myself from both him and his family. Looking back, maybe that child was lucky not to be born into such a family. I also remembered after that miscarriage, I'd developed a fever from an infection. Lying delirious in bed, I asked David Wilson for water. He brought a scalding cup, fumbled, and spilled it all over me. The pain was excruciating, but he didn't care. I'm working, stop making a scene. He'd snapped. I pressed the call button, tears in my eyes from the burns blistering my skin. He called me dramatic for overreacting to a simple burn. I still have the scar on my wrist. Now, Calla merely tripped, and he'd rushed to her side. But things were different now. I no longer cared about him or her. I picked up my phone to message Luna, only to see a new message from Calla, a photo of David Wilson cooking in the kitchen. It was quickly deleted. Oops. Wrong person. Mrs. Wilson. Sorry to bother. I scoffed and checked her Instagram. The photo there was carefully angled, a man cooking. Back blurred beyond recognition. Her caption, Mr. Wilson insisted on cooking for me. I couldn't say no. David Wilson had never cooked for me. Born into privilege, he'd always had an aristocratic temper with everyone. Even when we were in the honeymoon period of our relationship, he'd never bothered with such chores. I never expected he'd go so far for Calla, treating her better than he'd ever treated me. I closed my phone, ignoring her provocation. Half a month later, I was discharged from the hospital after recovering. When I saw David Wilson's call, I assumed he'd finally decided to sign the divorce papers and answered. His urgent voice came through immediately. Aisha, why didn't you tell me you were pregnant? Why should I have told David Wilson? After my first miscarriage, I'd told him I wanted a child. But what had he done? He didn't want kids but also refused to use condoms. So he'd secretly added birth control pills to my food the next day. I was silent for a long time before replying calmly. Weren't you the one secretly putting birth control in my food? Since you didn't want a child, this should be what you wanted. After all, the one who killed this child was his own father. David Wilson seemed shocked I'd discovered the truth. There was a long silence. So quiet I thought he'd hung up. Then he said, "The company was rushing to go public back then, it wasn't the right time for a child. But now that the company is listed, we can definitely have one." He promptly shifted all blame to me. "This is too much. I'm the child's father. And you didn't even tell me? You made me." I rolled my eyes, about to hang up, when a piercing voice interrupted. "Mr. Wilson, can you hand me a towel?" Even though I was used to David Wilson and Calla's closeness, I hadn't expected they'd gotten this far. How ridiculous, he just pretended to care about me. Yet here he was with her. "Who's with you?" I asked. David Wilson's voice was hoarse. "No one, it's just the TV." I scoffed, not bothering to argue. Then the same sweet voice came closer. "Clear as day, Mr. Wilson. I'm done showering. You go next." Unable to keep lying, he explained. "Aisha, Calla's home flooded, so I had to let her stay. Nothing happened between us." Calla feigned surprise, raising her voice. "Are you on the phone with Mrs. Wilson? I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilson, I didn't mean to trouble Mr. Wilson. I'll leave right away if you're upset." Before I could even speak, David Wilson jumped to her defense. "Calla, I invited you. You don't need to apologize." Then he chided me. "Aisha, she just graduated from college. I treat her like a sister. Stop being unreasonable." So even if Calla were in his bed, I was supposed to believe she was just a sister. Pathetic. "Yeah, there's really nothing between us. Mr. Wilson just looks out for me because I'm young." Calla chimed in, though I detected frustration in her tone. Of course she wasn't satisfied with being a sister. Anyone could see she wanted to replace me as Mrs. Wilson. David Wilson knew it too, and he enjoyed the adoration of a young, beautiful woman. I hung up without another word. Shortly after, the phone rang again, assuming it was David Wilson. I answered irritably. "David Wilson. Have you had enough? Do I need to spell it out for you?" There was a long pause. Just as I thought he'd backed down, a familiar voice said, "Oh, I seem to recall Miss Aisha needing my help. Or is this how you repay me after I lent a hand?" My heart sank as I checked the caller ID, Caspian Carter, my former direct supervisor at the old company. A self-made legend, no connections, no background. He'd risen to CEO of a listed company by age 30. When I'd worked there, he'd been a project director. My superior. "Heard you applied to the project department. Why didn't you come to me directly?" Come to him? We'd had a strained relationship, even competing for projects in the past. Approaching him would have been suicide. I forced a laugh. "Mr. Carter, I wouldn't dare bother you. Stop teasing." His voice dropped slightly. "You weren't the flattering type before." I stayed silent. No, I hadn't been, but things had changed. I didn't want to dwell on it. Thankfully, he moved on. "Report to the project department tomorrow. 1 month probation. Pass. And you're permanent. Fail. And you're out." I asked in disbelief. "What did you say?" His tone was flat. "If you didn't hear me, never mind." "No. I heard. I'll report tomorrow," I rushed to say. He chuckled faintly before hanging up. I was too thrilled about the job to overthink it. The next morning, I reported 4 with Caspian Carter's recommendation and familiar faces in the department. I completed the paperwork quickly, though I'd been out of work for 5 years. I hadn't been idle at home. David Wilson had claimed I was out of touch with the times. But he was wrong. By the end of the day, I'd already grasped all ongoing projects thoroughly. Before leaving, Caspian Carter called me to his office. Nervous, I asked, "You wanted to see me, Mr. Carter?" He looked the same as before, gold-rimmed glasses, meticulous at his desk. "How's your health?" he asked. "My health? I'm fine, eating well, sleeping well," I replied awkwardly, swallowing hard. He gave me a look, then told me to report on my work. After my summary, he assigned new tasks without comment. As I left for home, David Wilson's Kian pulled up. He stayed in the driver's seat while Kala stepped out from the passenger side. I remembered this was the car he'd secretly bought with her recently. I'd found a milk tea-colored lipstick in the passenger seat, her favorite shade. At the time, he claimed she was just a secretary and sitting up front was protocol. I'd forced myself to believe him. But now, seeing her act like the mistress of the house, I couldn't pretend anymore. Kala handed me a gift bag. "Mrs. Wilson, this is a present from Mr. Wilson." I glanced down, a necklace. But my eyes were drawn to the bracelet on her wrist, identical to one Wilson's mother owned. Sensing my gaze, she quickly hid her hand behind her back. David Wilson, embarrassed, said, "Kala gets along well with my mother, so she gave her the bracelet." Did he really think I didn't know? That bracelet was a family heirloom, passed down from his grandmother to his mother. In 5 years of marriage, I'd only visited the Wilson family once, when I was pregnant. I'd never been deemed worthy of their heirlooms. Yet here was Kala, not even a mistress officially, receiving the bracelet from my vindictive mother-in-law. Should I praise her cunning or lament my own worthlessness? "Aisha, didn't I tell you to wait for me at the company? Why did you come down first?" I turned at the sound and saw Caspian Carter walking out of the building. He didn't glance at David Wilson or Kala once, as if they didn't exist. David Wilson frowned at the sight of Caspian Carter. Caspian Carter. Caspian Carter didn't even look at David Wilson. Instead, he tossed me the car keys. "What are you spacing out for? Go drive. Didn't you say you'd treat me to dinner?" I looked at him with a puzzled expression. Well, he was helping me out. Treating him to dinner was the least I could do. I took the keys and headed for the parking lot. But David Wilson grabbed my arm. "Aisha, what's your game? Have you been cheating with Caspian Carter this whole time? Is that why you want a divorce?" I felt disgusted by his touch, even more so by his words. Before he could react, I jerked free. "Just because you're dirty doesn't mean you can smear others. I want a divorce because you cheated." David Wilson shook his head. "I didn't cheat. Kala and I didn't do anything." Kala frowned, looking uncomfortable but silent. I stared at David Wilson, amazed by his audacity. What he'd done with Kala was cheating in every sense. Did he really think you had to be naked in bed together to count? I scoffed. That might fool others. But don't fool yourself. I turned to leave, but his voice stopped me. "I won't agree to a divorce." I paused and looked back. "Then I'll sue." With that, I grabbed Caspian Carter's hand and walked away. Once we were out of their sight, I let go and apologized. "Sorry for dragging you into my mess. Thanks for stepping in earlier." I tried to return the car keys, but he didn't take them. "Let's see. I took you to the hospital from the hotel, gave you a job yesterday, and helped you today. You won't even buy me dinner?" I froze. Suddenly connecting the dots, the man who'd carried me to the hospital had been Caspian Carter. Given the circumstances, I couldn't refuse. That night, we skipped the fancy restaurants and went to a tiny diner at his request. The ambience was rough, but the food was delicious. We didn't talk much, just discussed projects and shared insights occasionally. After dinner, Caspian Carter pulled out an invitation and handed it to me. I gasped in surprise when I saw it. An invitation to Mr.I banquet? How did you get this? He shrugged. I and I are friends. You talked about his work earlier, so I guessed you'd like to go. I nodded eagerly. He's my idol. He rarely comes to China, and I couldn't get an invitation. Noting my excitement, he sipped his water. David Wilson will probably be there too. I paused, then shrugged it off. What did David Wilson's presence matter to me now? 3 days later, Caspian Carter and I attended I's banquet. It was full of London's elite, many recognized me, and whispers followed our entrance. I ignored them. Let me introduce you to I, Caspian Carter said, leading me upstairs to I's lounge. I was as I'd imagined, talkative and kind. We exchanged ideas freely, even swapping contact info with his secretary. When the secretary announced the banquet start, I stood. The dinner's about to begin. Nan. Let's catch up later, Caspian Carter replied in French, then led me back downstairs. Just as we arrived, I saw David Wilson enter with Calla on his arm. She wore an elegant gown, greeting others confidently as if she were Mrs. Wilson. Once. This would have hurt, now. I felt nothing. They might as well have been strangers. David Wilson frowned at the sight of me. The banquet was intimate and lively. Caspian Carter and I networked for our project, making good connections. Suddenly, a man in casual clothes burst in. Followed by security, he'd clearly sneaked in. He stormed up to Calla and grabbed her wrist. Calla! You said you'd leave once you got the confidential files. Are you really in love with David Wilson now? David Wilson stared at her in shock. I was equally stunned. Calla, the fresh graduate, entered the company and seduced David Wilson was actually for the confidential documents. From the man's tone, she'd already succeeded. David Wilson seized her wrist. Calla, were you sent to steal my files? She shook her head, tearful. Mr. Wilson, believe me. He's slandering me. I watched silently with the others. Of course she'd deny it, stealing confidential files was a serious crime. And with the Wilsons' influence, she could be locked up for life. But escape seemed impossible now. Just then, sirens blared outside. Police entered and approached Calla. Who is Calla? All eyes turned to her. The police apprehended her. You're under arrest for theft and trafficking of confidential documents. She was hauled away in a panic. David Wilson collapsed into a chair, dazed. The drama soured the mood. So I ended the banquet early and invited us to a bar. We talked late into the night. It was the first time I'd been this happy since quitting my job. Caspian Carter even gave me the next day off. That night, I was woken by noises in the kitchen. I found David Wilson cooking. He turned and smiled. Aisha, you're awake. It felt like a dream. Before marriage, he'd always woken up first to make breakfast. Now, he'd turned me into a maid. He set a sandwich and black coffee in front of me. Your favorite. I haven't drunk black coffee in ages, I said. My doctor had warned me not to drink coffee or anything like that for my stomach issues. I'd switched to milk years ago. He'd accompanied me to that appointment. Had he forgotten? He jumped up, knocking over the coffee cup. It shattered on the floor. As he tried to pick up the pieces, I stopped him. David Wilson, even if you're nice now, we can't go back. Like this cup, it's broken beyond repair. Tears in his eyes. He grabbed my hands. No second chance? I love you, I can't lose you. Do you really love me? I asked. If he did, he wouldn't have let Calla cling to him, wouldn't have fallen for her act. Maybe he loved me once, but he loved younger women's adoration more. You know the truth. If Calla hadn't gotten into trouble, you wouldn't be here, I said. He shook his head urgently. No. I fired her after you left with Caspian Carter. I only pretended to be with her when I heard you'd be at the banquet. You wanted to make me jealous? Sorry. David Wilson, I don't care who you're with. Can't we go back to how we were in college? I smiled sadly. The college David Wilson is long gone. Suddenly, he pushed me against the wall and kissed me roughly, nearly suffocating me. I shoved him away and slapped him. He turned his head, silent. Finally, he spoke. Where's the divorce agreement? I'll sign it. I fetched it from the study. He signed without reading. Face blank. Aisha, call me if you change your mind. I'll always wait. I took the agreement and walked away. To me, David Wilson was already a part of the past, with no place in my present or future. After the divorce, I sold my properties and bought a new place near the office. Caspian Carter entrusted me with the company's collaboration with Air, which I oversaw successfully. A year later, the project wrapped up, and I was promoted to project director. In my free time, I traveled with friends and pursued long-abandoned dreams, like studying for a master's degree school. I'd once deferred admission to University of Nottingham for David Wilson. Now, with friends' encouragement, I reapplied and was accepted. 5 years late, but better late than never. 2 years later, I graduated and declined Caspian Carter's offer to return to his company, instead opening my own studio. He sent flowers for the grand opening. Standing before the studio sign, I knew it was time to say goodbye to the past. The new Aisha was ready to embrace a brighter future.